In the final days of 2023, the Red Triangle's operatives sent a number of criminals from the Givati Brigade to hell. Among the perished was a captain named Harel Itak. However, Itak's demise was preceded by a crime that his army and its members have perpetrated throughout their illegitimate history. Just days before his ticket to hell, Itak heard the cries of an infant in a house in the Gaza Strip. He entered the home, which had been bombed by his comrades, and abducted the crying infant, sending her to his occupying entity. This incident would have shaken the world if it had occurred elsewhere or been committed by other criminals. Yet it was not the first of its kind. It was merely a continuation of a criminal path that the occupation has mastered since its earliest days and continues to tread toward its doom and destruction. What are the features of this path? And what are the secrets that the world's media is too ashamed to reveal? First and foremost, time, the year 1950. Place, one of the camps for Arab Jews in the occupied territories. The sun rises, everyone wakes up, and with them, the Yemeni settler Shoshana Dugma. She leaves her tent and heads to the children's quarters to check on her sleeping infant. However, an unpleasant surprise awaits her. The infant's bed is empty. Because the child is too young to run, she has most likely been kidnapped. Her mother realizes this immediately and understands that her daughter's fate will be the same as the children who disappeared from the Arab Jews' camps. Gone without a return, and no one will help her find her. Frequent similar incidents occurred during the entity's first 2 decades, only revealed by the Hebrew newspaper Mariv in 2015. In that revealing report, the newspaper announced that the Zionist government had kidnapped thousands of children from Arab Jews during that period, driven purely by racial motives. The Sephardic Jews, or Mizrahim, suffered severe persecution and disdain from the Ashkenazi Jews, who were the actual founders of the entity and the bearers of the occupation's banner. As Ashkenazi immigration continued to decline in the face of increasing Sephardic migrations, kidnapping Sephardic children and attributing them to Ashkenazi families became a means to establish Ashkenazi demographic dominance. Activist Shlomi Hatuka, the founder of the Amram Association, has confirmed these scandals as he specializes in the aforementioned kidnapping cases. He stated that hundreds of children from Yemeni, Tunisian, and Libyan Jews were forcibly taken from their families and given to other families of European origins. It was common during that period for a Sephardic woman to go to the hospital to give birth, only for the doctors to claim the baby had died. Alternatively, Eastern parents would take their children to hospitals for simple illnesses, only to be told they died without any bodies being handed over, or even death certificates. Some reports later revealed that besides transferring custody, some of these children were used as test subjects in certain medical experiments. If this is part of the entity's history with its children and its so-called chosen people, what then is its history with the children of Muslims? Uncertain fate. In the novel Returning to Haifa, the author Ghassan Kanafani tells us about Saeed and Safiya, who fled from Haifa to Ramallah in 1948. They returned after the Nakba and the opening of the borders with the West Bank to discover the fate of their usurped home. There they found the house waiting for them, and inside it they found Miriam and Dov. Miriam was a settler to whom the Jewish agency had given Said's house, and Dov was her adopted son, whom she found in the house. Said and Safiya had thought he died 19 years ago, when his name was Khaldun Said. Before your mind reminds you that this is a fictional story, let us note that Kanafani's imagination was woven with threads of reality. This story continues to be repeated with different names and places. In recent days, a Gazan father named Rashdi Alzaza announced his arrest along with his wife last December. He was released after 1 month without his wife, only to discover that his 2 children, Mohammed and Zaina, had been kidnapped by the occupation soldiers to an uncertain fate. While Alzaza could tell us his story, dozens and hundreds of others could not. In a short documentary clip by activist Ala Hamdan on Instagram, the comments were filled with endless stories of abductions. One commenter mentioned her uncle was kidnapped as a child, and they never learned his fate. Another nearly had her grandmother abducted. However, the most famous incident was that of little Nuran Al-Karmi, who was kidnapped by the occupation 22 years ago, and her fate remains unknown to this day. In 2002, Mossad agents kidnapped the child Nuran from in front of her house in Al-Karmi just because she was playing during the curfew imposed by the occupation. Despite her father Mohammed Al-Karmi providing numerous documents and recordings proving his daughter was kidnapped by agents of the entity, and even though one of the kidnappers admitted it, the Hebrew police denied the event and claimed there was no evidence of the kidnapping. The police and intelligence deliberately covered up the incident and ignored all the investigations and interrogations presented by Arab members of the Knesset. Nuran disappeared along with those who disappeared, and the mystery remains perplexing despite the clarity of its answer. But since we mentioned the Arab members of the Knesset, there are other stories deserve to be told. Systematic abduction. On the 12th of December 2019, Arab Knesset member Ahmad Tibi stood in the Knesset questioning the Zionist Minister of Social Welfare. The interrogation was about a shocking piece of information, Tibi announced. The ministry had sent Muslim children for adoption in Europe during the 70s and 80s. 192 Muslim children were abducted and handed over to Christian families in Sweden and the Netherlands in blatant violation not only of international norms, but also of Zionist law itself, which obliges the ministry to transfer the custody of children to families of the same religion. However, those who defied their Lord on the Sabbath left behind followers who circumvent any law. To avoid future legal accountability, they devised the scheme of sending the children to Europe. The newspaper Kul al-Arab, published in the occupied territories, picked up on this scandal and issued a report on the matter, raising many logical questions. Why wasn't there an opportunity for adoption within the country? Does the law permit changing the religion of infants and children who have inherited their religious identity? Was there anyone who received financial compensation after handing over the children? These and other questions were met with complete silence and disregard from the occupation authorities. Some Arab Knesset members even threatened to escalate the issue to the International Court of Justice. However, the flood came to inform these optimistic deputies and others like them that stolen rights are not regained through international courts. This is just a drop in the ocean of accumulated crimes of this entity, which stole history and fabricated a right for itself in the so-called Promised Land, then abducted geography under the guise of partition to swallow the entire land before kidnapping identity and Judaizing landmarks and sanctities. It is not far-fetched for those who do all this to abduct bodies and souls and attribute them to themselves. It is a narrative of theft that knows no path other than stealing. However, the years of rampant aggression have come to an end, and the end is near, even if they feel secure from demise. So be patient. Indeed, the promise of Allah is truth, and let them not disquiet you who are not certain.